faithfully delivering value by exploring great books worldwide. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk, and I'm Woo Hyun. Today we're diving into Liberty, Isaiah Berlin's most significant work as a political thinker. To discuss this book, let's start with a famous speech. You might know that the 20th century produced many iconic speeches. For instance, Churchill's "We Shall Fight on the Beaches" speech after Dunkirk, hailed as AA's most uplifting address. Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" at the Lincoln Memorial ignited the civil rights movement, and it still moves hearts. Back in 1952, Isaiah Berlin delivered a renowned speech on BBC Radio. The speech lasted 6 hours, caused a sensation, with media calling it a torrential waterfall. So, what was it all about? Freedom. In it, Berlin unpacked how past thinkers viewed freedom and critiqued their ideas. After the speech, Berlin revised it into the article Two Concepts of Liberty. Over the next years, he wrote essays like Political Ideas in the 20th Century and Historical Inevitability, Responding to Debates. These 4 articles, dubbed 4 Essays on Liberty, form the core of Liberty we're covering. Liberty is a landmark in British political philosophy. Berlin shares his views while dissecting key Western freedom concepts. If freedom fascinates you or you're curious about liberal thought, Liberty is a top pick. But before we start, let's ponder. What's freedom? Boundless living or legal rights? Is free market freedom the same as sacrifice all for freedom in that famous line? No need to rush with answers to these questions. I ask to remind everyone that freedom seems universally understood, yet most grasp it superficially. As Berlin himself said, freedom is a word so full of contradictions that no single definition holds. So instead of debating definitions, Berlin highlights 2 core meanings that reveal freedom's essence. He termed these negative liberty and positive liberty. What are negative and positive liberty? Simply put, negative liberty is freedom from interference by others. It's passive. You don't need to act to possess it. For example, freedom of speech is negative liberty. It exists even if you can't speak or write. Positive liberty concerns self-realization, freedom to pursue goals without obstacles. Take medieval crusades, European knights invading Muslim lands to reclaim Jerusalem, a stark example of positive liberty. Naturally, this clashed with local Muslims' positive liberty. Berlin dedicates extensive analysis to both liberties. First, let's unpack negative liberty. As mentioned, it's freedom from interference. But humans are social beings. Absolute non-interference is impossible. You engage with family, friends, bosses, colleagues. Even in today's isolationist culture, you're bound by laws. You can't murder or act recklessly. Thus, negative liberty operates within limits, a boundary between private and public spheres. Advocates argue modern citizens must have a private domain. Within this domain, he remains free from others' interference and coercion by authority. Here, he possesses sacred and inviolable personal freedom. So why is that? Why do people need such a spear of freedom? Berlin believed that among thinkers advocating negative liberty, Mill articulated its significance most brilliantly. Mill argued that people need interference-free space to develop complete personalities. Without living as one chooses, spontaneity and originality vanish. Mental vitality and moral courage disappear, let alone genius emerging. One becomes spiritually desiccated, a cripple or dwarf. If everyone were thus, truth wouldn't surface and civilization wouldn't advance. Guaranteeing personal freedom within limits allows personalities to flourish and lives to diversify. To Mill, this was the world's most precious thing. But where does this freedom's boundary lie? Where should we draw the line between private and public? French thinker Benjamin Constant offered the most representative view. He outlined 5 citizen rights. First, individual freedom versus public power. Second, religious freedom, freedom of belief. Third, freedom of opinion and expression, free speech, plus property rights and protection from arbitrary power. Constant's framework for negative liberty is now modern consensus. Okay, negative liberty. Let's pause here and examine positive liberty. Positive liberty is freedom to act. Its advocates seek self governance, being thinking, willing beings responsible for choices, masters of themselves. Thinkers supporting positive liberty outshine negative liberty proponents in brilliance. This tradition spans Plato's Republic, medieval theology like City of God, to modern giants, Kant, Hegel, Marx, all championing positive liberty. These great thinkers' freedom theories are profound and hard to explain briefly, but overall, they believe true freedom requires breaking free from irrational control to achieve a rational self. A free person should be rational. Guided by reason, one can understand goals, devise strategies, and successfully achieve them. True freedom lies in rational actions and living. Aligning with reason reflects human essence. Positive liberty is inherently tied to rationality. Sounds wonderful, doesn't it? So uplifting and positive. Yet beneath its positive facade, positive liberty hides subtle dangers. Take a simple example. You, me, and him. All believers in positive liberty, seeking self mastery. Acting on our ideas and goals is good. Having thoughts and actions is positive. The problem, our ideas may differ, and what we want could clash. Say, I'm a vegan, believing eating meat is sinful today, while you're a carnivore, insisting it's natural. Do you think some animals are okay to eat, others not, calling veganism hypocritical nonsense? Such differences breed conflict. Like years ago in Guangxi, dog lovers protested against dog meat consumption, a classic case. Berlin warns such conflicts arise internally when pursuing self mastery, saying, I'm my own master means I'm no one else's slave. But I might become a slave to my own body or desires, a slave to strange hormones or overwhelming emotions. In fact, when emphasizing self mastery, we first confront internal elements needing suppression. These could be uncontrollable desires, animal instincts, or emotional impulses. Of course, we must suppress them because freedom shouldn't mean freedom to do foolish or wrong things. So, how do we suppress them? Through reason. Plato, Kant, and Hegel all saw the rational self as superior, real, ideal, autonomous, free from impulse, desire, or instinct. This rational self is inherently dominating from the start. Why? Because in dominating your will, it successfully suppresses impulses, desires, and instincts. Now, back to our scenario. What happens when your, my, and his actions clash? Berlin believed positive liberty advocates see themselves as rational. So in conflicts, they tend to impose their will on others, seeking domination. And this domination often succeeds. Why? Because positive liberty believers are driven, they enhance capabilities, gain resources, and dominate more easily. Thus, expanding positive liberty infringes on others' freedom, its first hidden danger. Another danger, positive liberty, seemingly personal, easily slides into authoritarianism. Why does this happen? The answer lies within it's that same question again. When we say, I am my own master, what exactly is this I? When defining yourself, you'll notice most descriptors are group based. Like, I'm Chinese, from Shanghai, a woman, Asian, a feminist, etc. Does the true self become something broader? Institutions, churches, nations, races, classes, cultures, parties. Once this collective identity is deemed the true self, those in power exploit it, imposing collective will on individuals. Thus, freedom's doctrine becomes authority's doctrine, oppression's doctrine, a gilded mask for brutal tyranny. Throughout history, countless events oppressed individuals in the name of collectives, nations, classes, or ideals. People were taught that achieving glorious collective goals would bring true freedom for all. In reality, individuals got oppressed, tortured, even sacrificed. Combining these two dangers reveals positive liberty's utopian peril. Every utopia paints a beautiful blueprint, an ultimate goal. This goal reigns supreme. Social progress marches toward it. Armed with this goal, positive liberty violates others' negative freedom in the name of greatness. For humanity's lofty goals, individual freedom must yield. We're told to see ourselves as ocean drops or machine cogs. Last century's totalitarian disasters show positive liberty attacking negative freedom, turning against itself. It brings not freedom but enslavement. Thus, we understand Berlin. Negative and positive liberty aren't interpretations but irreconcilable life goals. Clearly, Berlin sides with negative liberty, warning of positive liberty's dangers. This danger roots in humanity's ancient ideal, an ideal believing in cosmic order, everything in its place, single correct answers existing somewhere, where people embrace all positive values, basking in truth, happiness, and virtue. Yet, Berlin declares this ideal absurd. Absolute truth doesn't exist, at least not in human societies. Positive liberty advocates treat freedom as a tool to achieve goals or ideals. However, freedom itself should be the goal, radiating its own inherent value. In the book, Berlin invokes his beloved Mill's perspective. Mill believed we can never define what constitutes greater truth or happiness. Interactions between humans and nature, society, and each other constantly generate new realities. Yet, this novelty, this incompleteness, is humanity's most quintessential and willful trait. For instance, we know women were long suppressed and dominated by men worldwide. During modernization, women began pursuing liberation and freedom. How did they pursue it? Initially through love, free romance opposing patriarchal systems and arranged marriages. Here, free love was seen as life's happiness. But over time, love lost its liberating meaning, becoming a new shackle. So women sought new paths: economic independence, sexual liberation, refusing motherhood. Note, all solutions in women's liberation journey are tentative and incremental, never final. Yet each attempt in this process holds value. Human nature is complex. Distinctions between will and desire blur, people err, views shift constantly. We're hardly the universe's essence. Human goals clash in perpetual opposition. Or aim might be simplicity, his indulging in worldly pleasures. In such cases, we can only minimize conflict and tragedy. How to minimize them? By establishing boundaries of personal freedom through negative liberty. These boundaries mustn't be crossed by anyone or any organization. Such boundaries let people uphold beliefs while respecting others. Upholding beliefs doesn't require respecting what you fundamentally oppose, just tolerating it, enduring it, disagreeing, disliking, even mocking it. But tolerate because tolerance prevents suppressing others, guarding humanity's last line of defense. See? Compared to positive liberty, negative liberty is a fallback, full of concessions and compromises. It lacks idealism's glow but brims with practicality. And negative liberty doesn't seek vast realms but a small personal space. In such confined space, we can't act freely, yet abandoning it risks manipulation under positive liberty. So instead of workers running factories, focus on practical ways to limit managers' power. Instead of everyone ruling, design systems to constrain state and government power. Admittedly, within negative liberty's bounds, some choose gloomy, wrong, even degenerate lifestyles. They say many youth today find joy only in celebrity worship, cat videos, and gaming. But so what? Berlin argues our era already has excessive technology, planning, and life control. What we need isn't fervent beliefs or strong leadership, but enlightened skepticism, tolerance for eccentrics, and harmless little joys like cat videos. By now, we understand negative and positive liberty. These concepts in Liberty, Berlin also tackles common confusions about freedom. Fascinating stuff. Let's explore key insights. First, is freedom innate to humanity? You've heard claims that freedom is an inborn craving, even surpassing life itself. But Berlin counters ancient civilizations rarely discussed individual freedom. Even in ancient Greece and Rome, legal concepts lacked notions of personal rights. Actually, human nature is probably anti-freedom. Berlin states that most people's nature isn't to embrace freedom, but to escape it, which is why many welcome authority and crave enslavement. Because freedom involves responsibility, and shutting that burden brings relief to many. In Dostoevsky's the brothers Karamazov. The Grand Inquisitor's stance is highly representative. The Grand Inquisitor said that the most terrifying thing is free choice, groping in darkness, but the church lifts responsibility, making people willingly, gratefully become happy slaves. Berlin points out that freedom is a relatively modern concept, and even in Western history, it's an exception rather than a constant. It's not a universal thing. Both negative liberty, freedom from interference, and positive liberty, self mastery, only emerge after civilization develops. Therefore, we should see freedom as a modern mechanism, not an innate part of human nature. Okay, since freedom marks high civilization, next up, does knowledge bring freedom, given that civilization grows with knowledge? And once freedom emerges, people naturally assume it comes from knowledge. However, Berlin notes that knowledge and freedom aren't equal. First, theoretically, knowledge and reason are closely linked. In other words, thinking knowledge brings freedom is very similar to the positive liberty view linking reason and freedom. And once you accept freedom led by knowledge and reason, you start pursuing the ideal self. Then, step by step, you inch toward positive liberty's most dangerous path, from dominating oneself to dominating others. Then, practically speaking, knowledge may not bring freedom. Berlin says increased knowledge can open new opportunities, but it might also close other doors, like how poets use fantasy and myth to spark imagination and creativity. As knowledge and reason grow, they consciously or unconsciously dispel those fantasy and myth influences. The price paid is loss of inspiration and diminished talent. If Kui Yuan were an astronomer, would he have written such romantic verses as Heavenly Questions? If Li Bai had deep geographical knowledge, would he have penned Mount Tiamu piercing the sky, surpassing the five great mountains? Granted, poets are extreme examples, but they prove knowledge doesn't guarantee freedom. Let's examine a more intriguing perspective about freedom and desire. This view claims controlling desires brings spiritual freedom. Such arguments sound persuasive. It suggests most suffering stems from excessive desires. We crave happiness, health, wealth, power, but can't attain them. Thus, we feel pain and frustration, becoming slaves to our desires. But if we abandon these pursuits, sever our desires, we gain spiritual liberation. Then we become truly free. Berlin notes this desire control appears in many religions. Severing desires is like strategic retreat into an inner fortress. Such withdrawal might bring peace or detachment, but can't be called freedom. Berlin wrote, barricading myself at home to resist enemies might feel freer than capture, but is it freer than defeating them? To Berlin, this spiritual freedom might be self-deception. If I accept oppression or endure it stoically, does that mean I'm not oppressed? If I sell myself into slavery, does that make me not a slave? This last question concerns not just freedom, but all abstract concepts. After all this talk about freedom, some might complain, why obsess over one word? What's the point? And truth is, modern China favors practicality over theory. Discuss problems, not ideologies, is near universal consensus. However, we shouldn't abandon conceptual thinking or dismiss abstract reasoning. Berlin reminds us, never underestimate ideas' power. Philosophical concepts born in quiet studies can destroy civilizations. Rousseau's works became weapons in Robespierre's hands that sent many to the guillotine. Fichte and Schelling's romantic beliefs bore fascist fruit through their fanatical German followers. Only by valuing concepts and persistent reasoning can we navigate the world's complexity. In this crisis-ridden world, we must grasp for fragments of hope. All right, that concludes our exploration of Isaiah Berlin's Liberty. Find reading notes below the audio. See you tomorrow.